November 2016, we've been hearing a lot about it, and even though it seems like a long time from now, that hasn't stopped the campaign announcements. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky recently became the second major Republican to announce he's running for U.S. president.
Rand Paul is a favorite of some conservatives, but he's no stranger to controversy and has even clashed with his own party leaders. On assignment's Philip Alexiou talked with VOA national correspondent Jim Malone about the long race to the White House in 2016. Check it out.
Senator Rand Paul made his announcement before a large and enthusiastic crowd in Louisville, Kentucky.
We need to boldly proclaim our vision for America. We need to go boldly forth under the banner of liberty that clutches the Constitution in one hand and the Bill of Rights in the other.
So a couple things. Rand Paul is going to be running on less government, for one. Then he's going to hit his foreign policy. But let's talk about his idea of less government. He seems to have a pretty good case right now, do you not think?
He certainly thinks he does have a good case, and he's got a lot of strong followers, including some younger people who believe in that case as well. This libertarian strain that Rand Paul represents is a strong strain within the Republican Party, but it's not dominant. What Rand Paul's going to have to do is find a way to take that sort of Tea Party, libertarian view, expand it over into some of the other types of conservatives that make up those key blocks within the Republican Party.
And so what about foreign policy? Because he's sort of I have heard some people say his foreign policy leans more to the way President Obama has been running his, the sort of less involvement in other countries' affairs.
Well, that part is certainly true. He's certainly chartered his own course on foreign policy. When you look at the rest of the Republican field that's developing for 2016, in the past he's talked about the need to negotiate with Iran. Now, some of these views may be shifting. He now favors strikes against ISIS in the Middle East, and he also now says that any agreement with Iran on its nuclear capabilities has to be approved by Congress and must end its nuclear ambitions. So he seems to have toughened up a bit on that. But on a couple of issues, like you said, long U.S. military engagements, no, he's not for that in the wake of Iraq and Afghanistan. And he's also a big critic of U.S. foreign aid, including to some allies, and especially in countries where there are frequent anti-U.S. demonstrations.
And the polls are kind of on his side when it comes to less at least not putting troops on the ground when it comes to U.S. foreign policy, right?
That's true. Now, what analysts say is the narrative for the 2016 race may be shifting, more concern in the polls about foreign policy, national security, the threat of the Islamic State, and so forth. So maybe those views that he's had, maybe they've slipped out of sync with where the public is moving. But again, the election's still more than a year away, and a lot of things can change.
And let's talk about that, because you have the Republican field, which looks like it's going to be pretty big. Mm-hmm. The Democratic field looking like it's going to be very, very small. Hillary Clinton, perhaps the former Maryland governor, kicks in as well. What does that mean? Is that a good thing that you have a large field on one side and not so big on the other?
Well, look, on the Hillary Clinton thing, I think some Democrats are wondering if it maybe wouldn't be a good idea if she did get some competition and some lively competition. That still could happen, but right now all the polls indicate she's by far the favorite for the nomination, though her approval ratings have slipped recently. Mm-hmm. We think because of the email controversy about this private server and all that may be hurting her. But in the long run, Democrats still think she'll be a very formidable candidate. But, we saw she was a strong favorite in 2008, right, and that didn't work out.
Right. And covering these elections, you've been covering them for such a long time, they have changed. I mean, the election cycle now is a long election cycle compared to the way it used to be.
Very long cycle. The access by media is not what it used to be. A lot of orchestrated events now that are kind of geared toward multiple platforms and especially television. My God, in the old days, you could walk up to some of these folks, especially early in the campaign cycle, and get one-on-one interviews with them, have a little time to chat. That was great. These days, that kind of thing is kind of time's gone by. You just don't get that kind of opportunity anymore. And, the voters also are kind of missing some of that individual contact. So many orchestrated events. But that's the nature of the modern campaign.
And what is it like for you as times have changed? Is it as much fun for you as it has been?
It is. You know why? Because each election cycle is really a window into America's soul and what's going on in this country. And the people that we prefer through the election process, the people who campaign, the issues they represent, and what draws the voters is a great indicator of where the country's at any given time. So they're still very important.
All right, national correspondent Jim Malone, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and speaking of the presidential race, bunch of hot button issues every election, including oil and energy.